Hello, welcome Goodman Games fans, and this is episode 13 of the Scrivenery. So we're going to take a couple episodes now with a slightly different direction where we are going to spotlight some existing third-party products that are out there, talk with the people who have come up with those products, and get some input from them that might be helpful to you. So what their background was, what their process was, how they put these out, and get some thought and inspiration perhaps. So I am Ed Stanek as always, and with me as always is my co-host Trevor.
Hey everybody, how you doing today?
And for today's episode, we have brought in Jonathon Snodgrass, who is the creator of Starcrawl. So let's dive right into that. Say hi to the folks, Jonathon.
All right. Yes, hello. Thanks for having me. Very glad to be on here. This is pretty exciting. Jumping on the Goodman stream is good stuff.
All right. Glad you could join us.
Yeah, welcome.
Especially on short notice.
yeah. No problem. No problem. It's anything I can do for you guys. More than happy.
So let's take a look at your publications. So of course the corner piece of it all, the center of it all, is the Starcrawl main book. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the nature of that? We'll come back after we've gone through some of these, and then we'll dive into what your process was.
Yeah, absolutely. So Starcrawl is it's a sci-fi setting rules for DCC or MCC, although really it's pretty easily adaptable for any kind of D20 based rule system. I really made it specifically to be kind of setting agnostic, so you could really use it with any kind of sci-fi universe. I wanted to be something that any judge could pick up and say, you know what, I want to use this for my game. I want to use elements of this. I want to put this in. One of the core concepts that I wanted was that I really wanted something that fit with DCC, had that same kind of same kind of play style, something that was easy to learn, easy to play, and didn't interfere with the game. I think everybody who plays DCC really wants something that doesn't interfere with their role playing, doesn't interfere with their experience, something that kind of enhances and moves things along. And that's really what I wanted with Starcrawl. And I think based on the feedback, based on the games that I've run for folks, I think I succeeded. I'm not going to say it's it's not the it's not the old D&D first edition DMG. It's not some classic game. It's not the War and Peace that some of the supplements are. I think it's enough that it gives you what you need and has room for you to create around it.
That's a nice guiding principle. Sorry about that, Ed.
No, go ahead. Yeah,
I said that's a nice guiding principle. So you use that as your kind of central hanger, and everything kind of hangs off of that, obviously, right?
Yep, exactly. And the big thing, I mean, we'll go into it more as I go into the development, but one thing that I really want with it is I want something playable. I want something that people can actually use. A lot of the supplements that are out there are awesome, very cool experimental things that you run for a session that you have a good time with. I wanted something that you could use for a campaign, something that you could play and pull to the table.
So it had to have some longevity to it.
Yeah.
And it needed to be simple, and it needed to be expandable.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So when you get down to it, very DCC-ish.
Yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
you made the comment, well, it's not War and Peace. Well, but that's kind of the whole approach of DCC is sometimes less is more.
Yeah. No, I absolutely agree. I think Joseph Goodman is really put together. I mean, it's anybody who's on this channel, I'm preaching to the choir here. But it's a fantastic set of rules. It's really simple and it's easy for folks to jump into, and I'm really honored to have something that's kind of a spoke in that wheel.
Great. Quickly bring up graphic number 1. So this is the cover of the core book. This is of course available on Goodman Games website, as well as on DriveThru. Is it on DriveThru?
Yeah. Okay. It's on DriveThru and PDF. It's also set up if you buy the print copy on the Goodman Games store, you get the free PDF with it. So we're doing that program with the Goodman Games store too.
And you're now into a second printing of that, right? I think that it's got like a yellow sticker or something, or big
it
thing that
doesn't
says-
actually, yeah, it doesn't actually have on the cover of the book. The book itself is still that same cover. It's just for the for the website. It's got a little bit of banner to let folks know. That was when between the first run of that, it was very successful. I think it did a lot better than I expected it to. And when I went to do a new print run, the cost of materials, cost of printing had gone up, and I had to raise the cover price. So doing that, I decided to add a little bit more to it. So I added one of the classes, the Space Cowboy class that had been added in an adventure. I put that into it, so it's all, have all the classes there for folks to reference in one book. I added a critical fumble table for laser weapons, for energy weapons, and I cleaned up a few things, did some editing. But it's it's for anybody that asks, though, it's much better. You absolutely need the second edition if you have the first edition.
All right, I'll say that.
But it's the same thing. And one thing that's one of my kind of tenets with it, I really didn't want to. I was forced to do a second version and raise the price a little bit, but I didn't want something that anybody had to buy. I'm a player, a judge myself first. I hate that. I don't want to ever put out anything that anybody looks at as a cash grab. It was just, the way things are. And I have too, like, for example, the Space Cowboy class, I have that for free up on my website, so people can get that, so they're not missing out on anything if they still have that first book.
Great principles. Yeah.
All right, so let's step through the adventures. Why don't you go through these one at a time? Give us what it's called, and if you want to give just a quick flavor text kind of introduction for each one.
Yeah, absolutely. So in the rule book, there's a 0 level adventure, the Promethean adventure, which, if you've ever seen the Poseidon adventure, that's kind of what you're getting into. It's this disaster epic. You're on a spacebound cruise ship, and disaster occurs, and you have to escape through the ship. You have to find some way to get to safety before this ship blows up. It's a really fun adventure. I've run it a few times at conventions, ran it locally. That was the adventure that I initially did play testing for all the Starcrawl rules. It's one that personally I love. I've always had a dream of, and I might someday do this. I've always wanted to run it at GaryCon with multiple tables and multiple groups together as different groups running through the ship, with a couple different game masters, kind of having the groups interfere with each other, and fighting
Nice.
over escape pods, stuff like that.
Nice.
But then came out with 3 in Station 0. This is a second level adventure. It's the first standalone. This one is the adventuring party gets a lead on an abandoned research space station, and they have the opportunity to get in and try and take over and get into this space station, uses their own base. Again, though, there's a little bit of a race against time, as other pirates have found out about this base as well. And if you're able to take control of it, you might have the opportunity to fight them off. Otherwise, you're going to be dealing with another adventure, another adventuring party kind of challenging you.
Can we get graphic 6 up while he's finishing up the list? Go ahead.
And next was Electric Friends. This is a 3rd level adventure. This is one that I had a lot of fun with, this one, writing it and running it. It's very much a players against the environment kind of adventure, where they are hired to go and find a piece in an automated robot factory. They need to find a piece for their benefactor, for their hiring party. And it's one that I like. There's some really horrifying horrifying scenes and monsters that folks run against. So I think it's a fun little bit of horror element to it, kind of going against the adventure rather than or the environment, rather than going through fighting just monster after monster. Most recently, too, just this year, the newest adventure, Scions of Leviathan. This is a 6th level adventure. I've kind of referred to this as my COVID adventure. I wrote it just kind of at the beginning of COVID. One of the earliest play tests was going to be at the canceled physical GaryCon. Ended up running it virtually and ran it several times over the last couple years, play testing it, refining it. That was one got you as a play tester on that, Ed. And it's a blast. It's a little bit inspired by Conan the Barbarian, where you've got to rescue someone from a death cult, and kind of figuring out what's going on with the death cult, dealing with these oddball cultists. It's a lot of fun. It's one I really enjoy. Doing it at 6th level, I was able to put a little bit more difficult NPCs, a couple of folks that can really kind of wreck your day when thrown up against the party. But that's a fun one. Again, I really enjoyed Scions of Leviathan, and of course there's an adventure written by my dear friend Dave 8-Cylinder in the Beyond the Flesh supplement. That's the cybernetic supplement I did for Starcrawl DCC MCC, and inside that is the cybernetic underbelly, which is a really cool adventure Dave wrote about trying to kind of perform a heist, and then dealing with the after effects of that heist, and kind of, as things obviously go bad, and in dealing with circumstances around that. And it's got one of my favorite groups of NPCs, a group of space pigs that he called the Tenderloins. That that are we had a lot of fun going through and working with these kind of it's kind of like a 50s greaser gang of pigs, and that's a great time.
That's a nice suite of adventures and everything to support Starcrawl. So out of everything you've worked on then so far, what was your favorite publication to work on? Was it Starcrawl itself? Was it one of the modules?
I love Starcrawl. I really do. I mean, there's a reason that I'm doing adventures and supplements for it. But I think my favorite goes back to Vehicle Mayhem, the first thing that I self-published. That was a zine that provided some vehicle combat rules for DCC, MCC. Obviously, a lot less for DCC unless you've got wizard cars. But it's just a car combat book, and it's a blast. It's a lot of fun. I did a lot of play testing locally. We did a tournament for it at GaryCon 10 in 2018, and it's a blast. It was really heavily inspired by Mad Max. It's got an opportunity to do some fun, like Hot Wheels conversions of cars, put some spiky bits on them and stuff. And it's got a real sentimental place in my heart. It did well. I think it did fairly well. I made enough money from that to support the printing and pay for all the printing and publishing of Starcrawl. So it's really it really has been the cornerstone of the Tuesday Night Fiend Club.
Is that still available?
Awesome.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Is that still available?
It is, absolutely. It's on drive-through and in PDF and in print on the Goodman Games store.
Oh,
it's
cool.
It's got a great neon orange cover. Pretty much everything else I do, it's either black or white cover, and all my stuff I'm doing black and white to keep the price down for the fans. For the fans. And that one though, my neon orange cover, to give that kind of radioactive electric kind of apocalypse look to it.
So it's like DCC meets Car Wars.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's those car combat rules, I really use that as the basis for the space combat in Starcrawl. So anyone who's got both of those, they can really tell it's the same idea, it's the same thing. And I did kind of a stripped down version of Vehicle Mayhem in Beyond the Flesh. I added that for doing quick car chase rules, because I guess if you haven't got it by now, I love car combat and car chase rules. It's a really good time. The funny thing with Vehicle Mayhem though is that it released right around within, I think, 4 or 6 months of Gaslands. And so that I was hoping, I was like, this is it, I'm jumping in the market. There's nobody else that has a new car combat. And then Gaslands came out, and I was like, oh, this is so much better than what I did.
Have you seen Vehicle Mayhem, Ed? I have
haven't.
2 copies of it, so
I got to get this now. I was a huge fan of Car Wars. I never got to play it locally, but whenever I'd go to cons, I'd always try to get into a game. And so the concept of merging, of getting DCC based Car Wars action, I gotta get a copy of this.
And actually, graphic number 7 has the cover of it, so you can see
Yeah.
it.
Let's bring that up then.
Yeah, not only that, Ed, but I think you could probably adapt it. I have to admit, I haven't looked deeply enough into your own work to see if you've got chariot combat rules.
I do actually.
But you could almost do a vehicle mayhem chariot thing with big chariots and little chariots and everything. They've got like kind of like wound allocations across the vehicle, right? If I remember correctly, there's a template with a little car and it's got boxes, kind of like ammo boxes from BattleTech.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly that. It's like the armor boxes on BattleTech. You check off the boxes. Once you get through all the armor, you start checking off hull points. As you take hull points, you're going to start taking critical damage that might slow down your car, wreck the engine, wreck your suspension. But I too did it so it's all, the movement is kind of abstract, just on a single board, a single grid. And each round, you don't necessarily move. You just change position in relation to each other. So you're not, keep moving forward. It's just, okay, I pass this car. Now I'm ahead of them. These cars drop back, stuff like that. So it's like the idea is it's just on like a rolling map.
Yeah, like relative movement.
Yes.
Not absolute movement, right?
Correct. And it is too. It's got that kind of gonzo feel. Like when I knew it had hit, and when I knew like, okay, this is it, this is really going to work. I did a play test at the local game store here in Pittsburgh, Phantom of the Attic, and I'd done an open thing, and a lot of people came in. A few people came in that had never played any kind of DCC, anything like that before, and got them in, and they jumped it in. They did fantastic. And there was a couple that had come in, boyfriend and girlfriend, and they're playing through, and the boyfriend wrecked his car and did, as like a stunt before his car blew up, he jumped into the passenger side of his girlfriend's car, the car she was driving. And she looked at me and she was like, can I like shove him back out? I was like, sure. Yeah. She was like, oh yeah, absolutely. And just shoved him back out to his death. And I was like, all right, this works. This game really works. It was, this was somebody who'd never played a role-playing game before, absolute minimal experience with even board games, and she got it right away. Like, no, you're not jumping in my car. I'm taking you right back out.
Nice.
Yeah. So it kind of starts with Vehicle Mayhem. Sounds like that actually expands into Starcrawl. You got a whole bunch of adventures that you've written and everything. You mentioned before the show started, you've got some projects that haven't quite finished, but take us back. What are your actual inspirations for getting to that? I mean, obviously, you talk about Vehicle Mayhem, and I'm immediately thinking of Mad Max and things like this, but why don't you give us a kind of a rundown? What inspires you to do Vehicle Mayhem, to do Starcrawl and things like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's all about actually playing stuff and running stuff. The whole Tuesday Night Fiend Club comes from my home game. We play on Tuesdays. We get together every Tuesday for gaming. We have for several years now. And everything that I've written so far really came about from something that I did for them. Vehicle Mayhem was, I was doing a campaign. It was a dimension hopping DCC game where they were peasants that got sucked into this weird dimension where they got hit with these mutation beams that evolved them into higher levels and new forms. And in order to escape this place, they jumped through a portal and ended up in an MCC world. And in this world, one of the things they had to do, they found some way to get off this planet and potentially get home. And to do so, though, they had to steal a couple cars and go out onto a wasteland running from this gang. And that I was like, I need vehicle rules for this. I need a car chase rules for this. And that was the original Vehicle Mayhem. I did it like the board layout was duct tape laid out in lanes on a piece of big graph paper, and just with some Hot Wheels cars marking out like, okay, here's where you are. And the home group absolutely loved it. They were like, you got to do something with this. This has to go further. And I started playtesting from there. The next phase of the campaign was they finally found the way off the planet. Was this big this Armageddon arc that kind of launched off planet, and from there they got picked up by these alien pirates and sold to Gladiatorial Arena, and now they're in Starcrawl because I've got to come up with space rules, I've got to come up with laser gun rules. And as it was going, it was like, I can do something with this. I compiled all those notes, started working on it, started tapping back in as I started, expanding onto Starcrawl, tapping in. You were talking about my inspirations, old sci-fi, Star Trek and the Twilight Zone. While I was writing it, I watched both series streaming beginning to end. The original Star Trek, of course, Kirk and, big crazy spacesuits and stuff like that. A lot of musical influences. Anybody who's read Electric Friends is going to see how much it's inspired by 70s electronica and 80s new wave. I got some very obvious references to like Kraftwerk and Klaus Nomi and Tubeway Army, stuff like that. So it's, a lot of that kind of stuff, a lot of the stuff that I've consumed over the years, a lot of stuff that I've enjoyed, kind of trying to get those to fit into adventures. Right now I'm working on an adventure. I'm trying to get trying to make a Sun Ra album, trying to make Door to the Cosmos work as a Starcrawl adventure. So yeah, having a lot of fun with that.
That sounds
so
absolutely cool.
We've got a question in the chat that says, how difficult was it to make the new rules compatible with the already made DCC MCC rules? Which I guess, and as a predecessor to that question, maybe I would put this context. As you came up with these, did you make them as DCC variations from the very beginning, or did you come up with these rules and then afterwards decide how can I fit these into the DCC mold?
No, that's a great question, and that's it started out as DCC. That original Starcrawl campaign, those original characters that are still around, we've been on a little bit of a hiatus, but definitely need to get back to it. They were all Starcrawl or DCC classes. So it was, we had a couple wizards, we had a dwarf, we had an elf. It was a DCC group going into that. Mm-hmm. So everything I built, I absolutely built with DCC in mind. And if you look at the Starcrawl classes in particular, I really wanted things that fit in with those other classes. It made sense if you're in space. I don't need to recreate the warrior. We've got the warrior. I made the space cowboy that's a little bit more of a ranged focus character. I created the soldier character, which was much more of a support class. I really made things that fit in. I've got the swashbuckler, which it's pretty much a direct ripoff of the halfling, with a minor change in that instead of getting the hide skill, they just pick some other scoundrel or rogue skill, thief skill that they specialize. But I absolutely designed each of these classes to fit along with DCC. Similarly, all of the rules, the space rules, all that stuff, very much based, like I was writing that stuff up and looking at the DCC rules for drowning, suffocation, stuff like that, to get that stuff to mesh. The biggest change that I did was doing race templates instead of races class. And really the reason for that is I wanted players to be able to have any kind of alien race they wanted. And the thing is, if you're trying to do that with a races class, that really quickly becomes too restrictive, because I can't have trying to balance out and come up with 100 different alien races. Instead, I did the race templates. So you pick your class and then you've got a race template that you apply to that, similar to how D&D does, the separate races applying to the characters. But I really wanted it to be like something that, yes, there are certain classes that have really, really big advantages with the races. For example, a Stonefolk warrior is just a juggernaut, and a rodent thief is a really, really nice combo that pairs together. But I wanted it to be something that, yeah, there are certain advantages, but more than that, you can play any race template to any class. And, it's much more of a flavor thing. And the templates are completely customizable. So that was something else too. I didn't want to have it like this is what my space bugs look like. This is what my space pig looks like. Anything like that. Like whenever when I sit down at a playtest table and somebody says, "Hey, I picked up the space pig. What does that look like? What's the space pig? Well, what's it look like to you? When I say space pig, what do you think of?" And I've had players. I had a couple people who've played like space orcs, like just big orc looking guys. One player who who at the last GaryCon, who she wanted hers to just be a cute little unassuming piggy. Like it's just an adorable little piggy. Nobody thinks the piggy's going to rob them. Somebody else said, I just want mine to be like a Muppet, like pigs in
Pigs
space.
in space, absolutely. Yeah,
exactly.
That's the first thing my mind went to.
And that's, I'm so happy people picked that, because that was that race template wasn't on my original list that I was working with. I was talking to my wife at one point, and she said, "Why don't you have pigs in space?" I was like, "Oh, I need pigs in space." But it's really, it's something that I want the players to really feel that freedom, because you know what? It doesn't matter if your bug is a humanoid or if it's a dog-sized scorpion. It doesn't matter. It's really what you bring to it. It's how you role play it. Statistically, all those bugs are exactly the same. It's, it's your character. It should look how you want them to look.
No, I think there's something that is, granted, yeah, DCC has the race as class concept. So on the one hand, you might say, well, it doesn't really follow that same mold. But on the other hand, the fact that it makes one of the consequences of this, perhaps the primary point of it, from what you're saying, from understanding you right, is that it keeps each of those very flexible in terms of how it's going to be manifested. And there's something that's very DCC-ish about that. The fact that not every bug guy is going to be the same. Mm-hmm. And I think that's particularly helpful with a science fiction context, because you are, in most science fiction environments, you're playing in, whether it's a galaxy or however broad the setting is, regardless, there's probably numerous star systems and so forth, where your number of alien races that are possibilities are nearly boundless. And so having that flexibility for it to be variable, I think is something that goes very well with the nature of the setting environment, as how any GM would want to implement it. But then also, again, that brings it to, you run into this guy and he looks like this. Well, what is that? Well, I don't know. You don't know. You haven't, you're not familiar with that. And so I think that approach really goes very well with the DCC philosophy.
And one of the things to also, I love to direct people to the website. So www.tuesdaynightfiendclub.com. One of the things that I put up to help folks who, it's something that I always print out to take with me to cons, is a little random alien generator book. And it's basically like a single page printout zine where I put in there some tables for, if you want a little bit of guidance for how you want your space pig to look like. If you want to know about your robot character, what its appearance is, what kind of locomotion is, what its thoughts are on flesh. Should we destroy all flesh, annihilate all flesh, or wait until the time is right and then the machines rise? So those some fun little tables for that. But those are that's something else that's free that I'd like to hand out at cons. So a lot of times people sit down and don't have that idea of like, well, geez, I don't know, I didn't really think about it. There you go. Here's some fun little alien generation tables that you can throw in there.
Well, I wouldn't doubt if that's particularly helpful for people who, because at cons especially, you get a lot of people who are new to DCC.
Yeah.
And if they're coming from other systems, one thing that I've found is that if there's someone who's used to D&D, you're not used to having that flexibility, and so it can be kind of paralyzing, perhaps.
Yeah. And too, I mean, like things like, we've got the human class, which is your family of all the humans. If your character looks kind of human, if it's a Vulcan, if it's a Minbari or whatever kind of alien race is, they're all under that umbrella of human, because to some bug guy or a rat man or a lizard folk, you all look the same, whether your ears are pointy or what. You're all kind of fleshy and a little bit hairy. That's about how we identify you. So yeah, so like all of the DCC classes, whenever a DCC character comes into space, into Starcrawl, their race template is human, because you're all, whether you be dwarf, elf, or halfling, to that stone, that 7-foot tall stone man with a lava core, you're all the same soft fleshy bits.
So I mean, you've got a lot of scope there. Can you take us through some of your, step us through your project, your development of that type of a project, right? How do you come to those decisions that I want to build this type of flexibility into it? What is it that drives that?
A lot of it, I mean, it's like I said, a lot of what I develop is done at the table. So I'll run something, and I think it's the open GM secret, that the open judge's secret, that if a player suggests something, it's probably going to come up. If a player says, "Hey, geez, I hope this guy doesn't have thing." I didn't think about that. Maybe that guy does have that. That's a real good idea. So there's a lot of stuff that I've taken for my players. I mean, it's the folks at my table are phenomenal. The folks I've played with online with the DCC RPG Pittsburgh group are incredible. The folks at GaryCon that I go to every year, it's a lot of great people have given suggestions and kind of shaped a lot of these things. But it's for my process, I really start off with, I get notes. I have, kind of an outline of, okay, here's what I want to do. So like with Starcrawl, it was, okay, I need to have an occupation table. I need to have classes. I need to have races. I need to have spells for psychers. I need to have space combat roles, and I need to have a bestiary. And then kind of just working that outline, kind of going through it. For random tables, I created a Google Doc with my tables for all of the like weird the terrestrial twists and the space encounters tables that are in the Starcrawl book. I put those into a Google Doc and shared them with all the guys in my home group. Like, hey, if anybody's got ideas, throw them on here. Let's flesh them out. Let's brainstorm, and let's work from there. From there, it's a lot of refinement, a lot of playing with it. Making sure seeing stuff works. Again, back to the Starcrawl creations, one of the big rules that one of the players, Dave, in my home group was, his question was, he said, to have a good space opera role-playing game, can I play Han Solo in this? And my answer to him was absolutely. You got the Scoundrel class. There's your Han Solo. So that once it passed the "Can I play Han Solo" test, I figured, okay, I'm on the right path. But a lot of refinement. I mean, this was Starcrawl, especially. I think it was like 2 years of actual writing for this. At the time, I was doing a lot of travel for work. So when I'd be sitting in a hotel room, it was okay. I'm sitting down for 2 or 3 hours, refining stuff, working over Starcrawl tables, working out the classes, playing with this stuff, playing with the bonus tables and the save tables. From there, once it was fairly well polished, at least for Starcrawl, more than any of my later releases, I reached out to Joe Goodman and I say, hey, this is what I'm working on. I showed him the draft. It was my first big thing with it. I'd done Vehicle Mayhem, gone through him with that, and built a little bit of relationship there with him. And he gave some great feedback. He gave some great thoughts. Like, for example, I'd planned on doing it in zine format again, small format. And he was like, this is too thick for that. This won't work in that format. It's going to be a pain in the butt to have the book open on a table like that. He was absolutely right. I went bigger and was very happy. But he gave me some suggestions for printers, stuff like that. And I ended up was very fortunate to find a local printer, Kenness, local to Pittsburgh, who does really nice printing. And they were able to do, if you've seen the Starcrawl rule book, I think it's a great binding. It's good paper, stuff like that. And he kept it really cheap. I mean, that first printing of Starcrawl, I was able to sell that for $15 and make enough back that it was worth selling it. It's, up to 20 now. Like I said, costs of paper and stuff like that have gone up, but I'm still able to print through a local printer, and I'm really glad for that. So, I mean, that's, if I've got any advice for folks, it's, check your local places, even like my zine style stuff. Like, I go through a local Minuteman press. The guy that worked there, I started talking to him, and he's a fan of it. Like, when I gave Vehicle Mayhem, he was like super excited to be doing stuff like that, because they mostly do like church flyers and stuff like that. So it's finding someplace local, I think, is awesome if you can. I know you were talking, Trevor, about having a good relationship with your printer before. I think that's awesome if you can find somebody that you can communicate with like that. I think that makes things a lot easier too. And like I said, it's able to keep the price low, because I know for myself, when I was trying to do this isn't, I mean, I have no illusions that this is going to be a primary source of income for me, anything like that. It's really, I want to have my ideas and what I do at my table out for people. I keep it as cheap as I can, and I try to, do things as cheap as I can with it. Obviously, as you guys, if you've seen the books, this is not a no expense spared kind of production.
But those are important considerations, right? So I mean, it sounds like you've got really more of a passion project than than a production project, right? Where it's something where you're
Mhm.
expecting to make a specific return on it or something. And obviously there's combinations of both. But yeah, that relationship with a local printer can be absolutely essential, right? You
Mhm.
can walk in and say, show me the difference between a 60-pound paper and a 65-pound paper. Or you can walk in and say, I need to find a way to cut costs. How could
Yeah,
we do
yeah.
that? Right? Is there a, for instance, does the price step down per issue if I double the print run, right?
Mhm.
And
Yeah,
or
yeah.
at what point do your price changes happen at, right? Do they
Mhm.
happen at 100 copies and 200 copies and 500 copies? What are we looking at here? And those, you don't get that from a website, right?
Yeah,
So when I
yeah,
go to
yeah.
Mixam, I can sit there and play with numbers, and in my head I know exactly what's going on. But if I have anything custom, that website is useless,
Yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so yeah, so no, absolutely. um it depends on what you're looking for, but yeah, that's great, especially if you can find a printer who can do a good, I mean, you've got a nice square binding on that, and it, it's held up on my shelf.
Yeah,
So
I've got my copy. I don't know. Let's see. This is my copy. This was from the first print run, and I beat the heck out of it. It's got
yeah.
it's got coffee stains all over it where I where I dump coffee, and it's still, I mean, the thing that and I mean, you know how it is. I mean, anybody that's come through the 90s with role playing books and stuff like that. I mean, how many of the old TSR books are laying in a pile of paper and on people's bookshelves. I mean, but I've been real happy that this is held together. And I think it's I think my printer, a lot of the business that my printer does is doing like custom notebooks and sketchbooks and stuff like that for people, and doing a lot of like self-published art books and graphic novels and stuff like that. So they're very much focused on, we need to have something readable, printable, durable, that people can carry around in a knapsack rolled into a ball. It's I like I said, I got very, very lucky in that.
Yeah, yeah, especially having them right there. Now, I mean, most moderate size cities in the United States have 2 or 3 printers,
Mhm.
right? And some of them are expensive and some are cheap. And this is where you've got to go in and put the footwork in and actually walk in their door and say, "Here's my concept." And I don't know about you, but the first couple times I walked into a printer, and I have a background, in graphic design from high school and everything, and you feel a little out of your element, right? And you really don't know when they're like, "How many do you want to print?" And you're like, "Well, I don't know how many I want to print." That's a really good question. That depends on cost, and it depends on these things. And but just explain to them, "Hey, I haven't done this to you, before," and they'll help you out. And that's always been my experience. So yeah, so I'm
Yeah.
glad you found that. So you worked through that. Now there was actually, you made a comment on something, and I wanted to circle back to it if you don't mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
You said that there was a lot of iterations when you were working on Starcrawl, initially, right?
Mhm, mhm.
You had drafts, and you were kind of refining and refining and refining, and you'd send it off to like maybe Joseph Goodman for some comments. He'd come back and say, Jonathan, I think X, Y, and Z, and you'd go, yes, no, whatever. How did you organize yourself during that refinement process? I mean, on the Scrivenery, we're often talking about how do we produce something, how do we do it well, and obviously Starcrawl is a good product. It has good support,
Well, thank you,
and
thank you.
it's been well received by the community. So, somebody who's never built a zine before or something, looks at that and says, "Oh, this is the end product." But could you step them through how you keep? I mean, what's the page length on that? Is it 80 pages?
It's let me think. I think it's like 100 and
100.
100 and about 105. Yeah, about
Yeah.
105, 108. Yeah, yeah.
So it's a 100-page book, 105-page book. There's a lot to it. How'd you keep it organized?
Uh sort of. It's sort of organized. No, it's, I mean, part of my job is my day job is a lot of project management. So I've got kind of that background of, okay, let me break this down into steps, let me get the pieces. I started out kind of putting down and jotting notes of what is my ultimate goal with this, what do I want, what do I need, and kind of comparing it to some products that I liked. So really starting and looking at the DCC rulebook for this one, looking at, okay, what does DCC have? What is beginning to end the steps? Okay, first you've got character creation. Okay, then you've got to have equipment. Then you've got to have stuff that you're going to fight against. Then you've got to have tools you got to fight with it. So kind of those GM tools and stuff like that. I kind of did this early outline of those things that I wanted, that early outline of these are the things that I want to include. It changed a little bit. I mean, there was definitely some scope creep
Mm-hmm.
as things kept getting added, but I really tried to keep that restricted and keep it tight. Like anything like a big example was cybernetics. Cybernetics are something that I really love. I love the idea of cybernetic implants, having these kind of these power prosthesis, powered weapons that are attached to the body, stuff like that. And I started playing with that, and it kind of crept into Starcrawl. And I said, you know what, this is too much. Keeping that out of the main book, knowing that if this is successful, this is something that I can add later. The vehicle chase rules that ended up in there, that's something that I was like, you know what, I don't need this. I've got a basic version of this for spaceship chases, stuff like that. I don't need this other stuff. So having that initial vision that I'd put to paper was really useful for that, kind of keeping that scope creep to a minimum, keeping out all those things that I didn't need for people to run a space-based game. And that's, it was, once I had that outline, that really plotted out my writing, because I would go to a section and say, okay, I want to have two different, it was very clear from the beginning that I wanted to have two really big three random tables. One random table for stuff you might find somewhere, and then two other random tables for different planets you might land on and stuff you might run into in space. And those, like I said, right from the beginning, my goal initially was I was going to have 100 things on each of those tables, and I ran dry. I got close to 50, and I was like, you know what, let's change. Let's change this, makes 50 each. And I've had a draft sitting on my computer, I think for 4 years now, for Strange New Worlds, of expanding those out to 100. But again, that's like trying to do 100 ideas on a list. That's that's a lot once you get to that. But that was the thing, I would keep jumping around, and as I was inspired, as I had ideas, as things would come up in play tests, and jumping back and forth. So it was like, okay, I'm going to be running this adventure, I need spaceship combat, I need to focus on that section, let's get this done for Sunday. Okay, great, now I've got that. Okay, I've got 3 of the classes done, this is enough to mix some DCC in. Okay, now let's jump over to race templates. So there was, I mean, definitely a lot of jumping around back and forth, but it was really all to that outline. Like I created a document and had like page breaks for, this is my classes page, this is my race page, this is my occupation page, and as I could, just jumping back and forth in that, and it grew. Like I said, Starcrawl took me probably close to 2 years to get it done, and it was because I'm not that well organized with writing. But on the other hand, I just kept to that outline, keep dogging away at it. At the beginning, it's an empty 10-page document of just title headings. And, before I knew it, it was 100 pages with everything that I wanted to do.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. So you had the outline, you expanded there. I like how you mentioned that, you had to keep cutting out, kind of killing your darlings.
Yeah.
Pruning things that you love, cybernetics and chases and things like this, because that scope creep is a major killer to a project, right?
Yeah. Although seeing the Weird Frontiers book, I wonder if maybe it was a mistake. I mean, that's a beautiful beautiful encyclopedia.
It is, but I've talked to Dave about that, and that nearly killed him.
Right?
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah,
the amount of scope creep that happened during that Kickstarter. He's publicly said that was, he's learned a lesson.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
You really have to be careful, right?
Yeah, and that was, like I said, from work, knowing the impact of that kind of scope creep, I tried my best to avoid that, and I think I did well with it. I think it's a tight 100 pages for Starcrawl.
Excellent.
And in fact, really, even aside from even if you're not in something like a Kickstarter where you've got a hard time deadline, I think that's still definitely something to keep in mind, is that on the one hand, because I've run into this on my own projects as well. I could include this and I could include that. At least for me, I feel like if a project goes past a certain scope, it's harder for me to keep it moving along, because you have the issue of you end up feeling bogged down, and you lose some of your motivation, and I think that there certainly is a point where it's quite reasonable for those things to come along later, and kind of like we were saying in the early discussion, sometimes keeping something trim is actually, in fact, a little bit more keeping with the DCC less is more approach. And then if people want to have those other layers, then you can make those layers available to them. But
sorry, go ahead.
Well, but for some people or for some settings, maybe I don't want to have those layers, because part of the appeal of the system is that it's lean.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. If you look at the DCC core rules, there are things mentioned in the core rules that do not exist in the core rules.
Yes.
Right? They mention the spell Gesh. They mention the spell Craft Rod. There are things that are there and they intentionally tell you, we're going to mention that this thing exists, but we're not going to tell you how it exists.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Well, in fact, the book says something like there are 736 spells.
Yeah.
All right. There's certainly not that many in the book, but
yeah, absolutely. So, and I know that when I work on the Smoking Worm, there are references in articles to things that we know we're going to write, but we only have 56 to 60 pages, right? We have a very tight word count. And so sometimes we will write something and I will make a note that says, we'll come back to this, but for this article, this is the scope of the article. And I think that keeping things trim and keeping them lean and focused, even if you get a little verbose, is really important. So Jonathan, hats off to somebody who's writing and saying, you know what, I love this, but it has to be something different because I can't, that you could write forever and never actually publish.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's too. I mean, I one of the things that I really intentionally, very much inspired by the DCC rulebook, was I really kept everything setting agnostic. I really wanted everything to be, you can do whatever you want with this. Now, in the adventures, especially, I quite often throw in a few references, things like that, to kind of try and inspire folks, or exactly like you said, something that I'm going to make reference to somewhere down the line. Like for example, I think in one of the, I think in the Promethean adventure, I make mention of if anyone's captured, they might get sold into the fire mines of Mito Ebsen, and stuff like that. That's an adventure I'm writing. That's something from my home campaign, and things like that. I mean, I love the idea of people finding these little nuggets and running with it on their own and doing something fantastic. Do it, like in Scions of Leviathan, the whole idea of Leviathan, the giant, planet eating worm. That's something that, I might write that eventually. There was a big part of my home campaign, something that I've called the Deicide trilogy, where folks go off to kill a god. And that's something that's kind of suggested in there. But, I don't want anyone to feel restricted. I don't want to have something like a storyline campaign, something like the old like the old vampire game, or like the old Deadlands game. Like, I absolutely love those games, but I don't want anyone to feel like they're penned in by this overarching storyline or this overarching campaign. The universe is yours. It's enormous. Go nuts, have fun.
Yeah, and again, that helps leave you in the position of the flexibility of applying this to whatever science fiction world you want to have, and it gives you the openness of how you want to envision it and roll that out. So let's jump to artwork. I want to talk about what you've done in terms of finding artwork, in terms of or making arrangements with artists, or cases where maybe you use stock. So step us through some of the books, what your process was for getting art. What did you find? And then how you went about implementing it into your works, and also why? Uh, what did you feel like the artwork really added that was significant to have it in whatever production?
Yeah. So most of the artwork that I've done in this, if you've got piece number 3, image number 3, I love being able to refer to the number of the image, and just somebody just brings it up like magic. Thank you, Lana. But most of the art that I've done myself. If anyone has looked through the progressing of the adventures, I think I've learned a lot more about doing art. Like if you're looking at the art in Vehicle Mayhem, it is not something I'm particularly proud of. There's in particular, there's a guy leaning against a car, and that bumper looks like it's inflatable. It's horrific. But it's something that I was like, you know what, I want to do this. I really feel like this is something that I'm doing. I love that kind of homebrewed aesthetic. I like that this is something that this is produced by me and people I know. And it's not going to be super polished, but you know what, it's going to be fun. uh it was really cool. In the original Starcrawl book, there's a couple pieces from other folks in my gaming group. Alan and Brad from my gaming group, you'll see them in as play testers. Did a couple pieces that were fantastic. Alan did this amazing piece, if you've seen it in the book, of a a gorilla with like his brain exposed under a dome, and it's really weird looking picture, and I absolutely love it. But I've also had fortunately Dave 8-cylinder, who's in my home group, who's I found out through this that he's an amazing artist. He's an electronic musician and does his own album covers and does some fantastic art. And that would be image number 8. He did some really great art. This is a piece that he did for Three Station Zero. He's continued to do some great art for us. And recently, a guy by the name of Victor Spiels is absolutely amazing. This guy is an incredible artist. Sample of his is image number 5. Uh, he just reached out to me on Facebook and was like, "Hey," he was like, "I did a couple, like redrew a couple of your pictures from Starcrawl, and he put them up on Instagram, and they're absolutely amazing. There are some really, really incredible pictures. Like he
I like the
redid,
space pig.
That's what
yeah,
I was thinking.
yeah, yeah, and it's like it's that picture. It's like, oh my god, this is nuts. And some of the pictures, if you go to his Instagram, it's just at Victor Spiels. It's some nuts stuff that this guy's doing. And he was like, he says, "I'm an artist. I want to get into doing RPG art." And I was like, "This is fantastic. Yes, yes, yes." And I was able to afford, like I said, everything that I've made from everything I've written has gone back into the books, into writing the next thing, into producing the next thing. And fortunately, I've made enough from Starcrawl that I could afford to buy some real art. And so that's that's this stuff that Victor's doing. If you see in Scions of Leviathan, uh, if you're flipping through the good art, that's all Victor, and it's fantastic. And I love to I love to push him out, because it's this is somebody that I think is going to be somebody that's a really big name in the community. You look at his art and he's fantastic, and he's excited to get in. So I mean, it's I'm not great at soliciting artwork or finding anybody. Like I said, I'm kind of a do it myself, and I love that I've got somebody whose first art for a published RPG is working for one of our things. So that's fantastic. So it's I'm looking forward to being able to game with Victor at some point here in the future. But it's and that's I haven't really solicited anybody else for art. Like I said, I mean, part of the reason being that I really, especially with the early books, tried to keep things cheap. I wanted to keep things inexpensive. There are a lot of amazing books. You guys are putting out incredible stuff, and I really want to make sure that I'm putting something out affordable. It's I think I've got a little bit of a niche of the the kind of budget books for folks looking to pick something up quick. I need to throw on another $5 to get free shipping. Throw in a Starcrawl adventure, stuff like that. So it's it's been great. And like I said, I've learned a lot, and I think improved in my art over the 5 years that I've been drawing stuff for my adventures. But yeah, I am really excited to have some great folks working with me as well.
Well, it's great when you can have the 1-2 punch, because certainly I can do a pretty mean stick figure, I'll tell you that. But beyond that, yeah, no artistic capabilities here. So that's certainly great if you can work in some of your own.
Absolutely.
So I don't remember exactly what the timing on this was. I think it was during COVID, but I played in an adventure you ran during one of the Cyclops cons. My wife and I actually played in that together, and had a great time. And I feel like personally, for those who have an opportunity, and I know I've mentioned this any number of times, but I think it bears repeating for any of our potential third-party publishers. Conventions make a great opportunity, whether it's an in-person convention or an online convention, make a great opportunity to plug your materials because, among other things, oftentimes you're running into people who are, especially at physical conventions, you're running into people who don't have a DCC background, and so they are open to whatever kind of new thing that you've got. So tell us, what have you done in terms of running at cons, or any other kind of, like if you've done any road crew type events where you've done something at your local game store and stuff like that? What do you do in terms of public games?
So So cons are tough between family and work. It's I got two young kids, and it's tough getting out for the cons. I do make time every year for GaryCon. I absolutely love that convention. A group of us from Pittsburgh go out just about every year, and it's a blast, and it's a great con in a lot of the ways, exactly as you said, Ed. There's a lot of players that aren't familiar with DCC. They just see something, oh, I don't know what this is, Starcrawl, sure, let me try this out. And I've gotten several people who had never played DCC sitting down at a table and came away as fans of both DCC and Starcrawl. So that's been fantastic. I'd like to get to more cons, but it's it's tough. As the kids are getting older, I'm hoping to maybe get some of the other ones, like get out to like maybe like Con on the Cob, or a couple of those others, a couple of the other Midwest cons. But I have, at least in the past, pre-COVID, at least, we did a lot locally in Pittsburgh with local game stores. As mentioned, we do DCC RPG Pittsburgh. Is our big group that Mike Bolam and others have led over the past. Stefan Flickinger and Jim Walls all kind of started up that group based out of Pittsburgh. We were doing a regular game every month. We do 2 or 3 tables there in the store. A lot of things, obviously, with COVID, we moved online. I think all of us have gotten a fair amount of COVID fatigue from running stuff online. It just we felt like it just we got it was fatigue. 2 years of
Mm-hmm.
playing online, it was really tough to maintain that, and it's kind of fallen by the wayside. I'm hoping that as we're starting to get into more in-person stuff, that we're able to get that going again. I'm hoping that we can kind of ramp up some of those games again. But it's it's tough keeping motivated for that. I have done a couple online games with the online cons, with the Cyclops con and stuff like that, keeping things going with play testing, keeping things fresh, keeping things going. There are a lot of awesome folks like Ed, Clayton, Laura Williams, a lot of awesome folks that have jumped on to the online games that I've really met and interacted with through that. And that's been fantastic. And I'd love to keep games going with them. But it's, it's tough. I'm hoping to get more going, but I mean, like you said, Ed, conventions are a fantastic opportunity. Anybody looking to publish, I highly recommend doing those. If you can get regular games, open games at your local game stores, again, always a fantastic opportunity. I remember Mike and we ran. One of the things that we had a real good time with was we did a kind of mini tournament for X-Crawl, Starcrawl crossover
Nice.
at one of the Gary cons, and that was a blast. I even pulled Vehicle Mayhem into that. I did a kind of Tron styled virtual Mayhem, and that was one where I did replace the random tables with stuff like glitches in the game, things like that. And like the big crushing event is the big virtual Jamiroquai that comes stomping across the table, smashing people. But it's stuff like that. I mean, another thing with the conventions is it's an opportunity to go wild sometimes. Like I've run a adventure a couple times that's a game show where people get sucked up, villagers get sucked up into a space game show, where it's basically like the Japanese style game show where everybody's kind of laughing at the strange villagers because they don't understand their customs or their inside jokes, and I mean, stuff like that. You can go wild at a con and nobody's gonna get upset. You can do some weird gonzo stuff under the banner of DCC or Starcrawl. People should run Starcrawl. If anybody ever wants to run Starcrawl at convention, let me know. I'll send you some swag or something. It's all good fun. I'll send you those little books, little tiny books.
Nice.
They're adorable.
Yeah, I totally understand where you're coming from about online fatigue though and everything. As a matter of fact, tomorrow is DCC day, and I'm going to be at a local store running. Ed, how about you?
So I'd contacted YadaQuest, and they said they're not doing on-site games. So I'll stop by, and they said they'll have some materials. So I'll stop by and check into that, and But so unfortunately, I didn't wasn't able to get something lined up.
It's a shame. I'm over at Gateway Games
Mm,
tomorrow morning for a couple of hours and everything to play from about 11 to probably 3 or 4, depending on how long the little adventure. We're running the Brendan LaSalle DCC adventure out of the book.
nice.
Jonathan, are you going to get in a game tomorrow?
No. Again, too. I mean, it's since COVID, our game store where we were running a lot of those things in person has kind of has shifted their focus away from in-store gaming.
Sure.
So it's been tough. But I will give a shout out to Gateway Games. That was one of the very early supporters of Starcrawl, reaching out to me to order some stuff to keep stuff in stock. So an awesome game store.
Yeah, Todd Bunn is great.
Yeah.
I think he might be out of Starcrawl at this point. So
Todd, give me a call. I gotta get some sent out.
Absolutely. So we're almost out of time, but Jonathan, can you round us out with any upcoming projects you want to plug, or things that are, things that you'd like people to know about you or Starcrawl?
Yeah, absolutely. So I got some stuff throughout COVID. I thought I was going to be a lot more productive than I was, but I started a lot of projects that I'm hoping that I can finish out. As I mentioned, I got the Fire Mines of Mito Ebsen. I just play tested that at GaryCon this last GaryCon. I think it was fantastic. It's a hex crawl on a mining prison planet. I'm working on trying to refine Door of the Cosmos. This is going to be an adventure that's specifically designed to bring DCC characters into space. It's going to be specifically made for this is something that you should be using DCC characters for it. I play tested a version of that at GaryCon that I think is going to be refined a lot. I'm kind of going all over the place with that. I have an idea for a linear adventure, but I've also got ideas for having like random rooms that the judge can pick different rooms for it, so they can mix and match rooms so they can keep reusing this adventure. I'm working on Cries from the Void. This is a mini adventure anthology, so it's a bunch of little ideas that I have, things that can't really fill out their own book, are all going to go into that little mini adventures and seeds. I've got a new patron that I'm going to be putting in there. A few things like that. Might put in a new class or some race templates. Still working on that. And mentioned I'm still hoping to get the seeds planted so I can get more stuff from that home campaign put into that. One of them I'm working on is a supplement that is just a world, to which I may do more of that in the future if this goes well. It's a planet that I've called Crystalaria, which is a very, very pun heavy world. Almost all the monsters and stuff are some sort of pun off crystals, but it's a fun world supplement, and I want to see how that goes. It's coming together well. I've kind of got the core of that and an adventure for on that world. But yeah, I got a lot of things that I'm working on that hopefully, now that I've got Scions of Leviathan out the door and I'm back to being productive and actually getting stuff done, that I'm hoping I can get back to putting out 1 or 2 books a year.
Awesome.
Great.
If someone wants to reach out to you and send you art or something like that, how would they get in touch with you, Jonathan?
Yep. So you can always go on the website. Somebody was kind enough to put it up in the chat. Thank you. To get that, you can go through there, or you can reach out to me on email. My email is the email for this is tuesdayfiend@gmail.com. That is like my primary email address there for any of that. But I'm also, you can find me on Instagram. I post mostly just miniatures pictures on Instagram, all the minis I paint, but that's John Snod, JONSNOD. If you are trying to get messages to me, anything like that, you can always get on there. And occasionally I might preview art or something, but it's really just miniatures. If you want to see miniatures, I did some spaceship miniatures. That's related to Starcraft. There you go.
Cool. Great. So I want to really encourage all of our viewers out there to check into Starcrawl. Like I said, I played it, had a great time. So go get yourself some Starcrawl action. You can get it off of the Goodman Games website. You can get it off in Drive Through RPG, and check out this product. It's a great product line.
Yeah, I own all of it. So
thank you.
Jonathan.
Yeah. You got to hit me up. Yeah, let me know. I'll get you some stickers and some poker chips if you don't already got them.
All right.
Sounds good.
And thanks guys for having me on. I really appreciate this. I really love having the opportunity to talk about Starcrawl and talk about gaming. It's and this was a great time with you guys. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. And thanks to Alana for kind of running the tech end of things, and thanks to Goodman Games to really giving us this forum to talk about the stuff we love. So thank you all.
We'll give a great big amen to that last comment. Certainly, we all appreciate Goodman Games for this avenue, as well as, of course, the base game and the flexibility of how they deal with third-party publishers, which I've said before is second to none.
Yeah, absolutely. I would agree with that.
Yeah, definitely.
So thank you for joining us. It certainly was our pleasure to have you on. I want to mention for folks to keep an eye out. In 2 weeks from today, we've got episode number 14. Our next product showcase coming up is going to be Skull and Crossbones. We're going to be bringing in our guest, the famous Bob Brinkman is going to join us for that one. So that will be a great show.
I'm looking forward to it. We got to grill Bob because he's only got one issue out of Skull and Crossbones.
It's a heck of an issue, though.
It's a heck of an issue, but we clearly need issue 2 and 3 by the end of the year, Bob. So I know you're listening. We're gonna be grilling you. You may have to walk the plank.
All right. So that's what we've got, and goodbye, good night, folks, and we'll see you next episode.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.